Hello everyone, my name is Liliana Velasquez and I am in my last semester of university seeking a Bachelor of Science in Public Health at Arizona State University. I hope everyone is having a great public health week and that you have all learned something so far through these informative videos and that you feel compelled to take some action. I want to talk to you all specifically about the impacts of climate change on public health, specifically as it relates to urban heat islands. We will dive into answering what is an urban heat island, what are the impacts on humans, and what can I do to take action. Prevention is really the core of public health, and it is in our power to take action to make a change for our communities in order to prevent and further mitigate the impacts of climate change. So let's get started. Urbanization is happening right now, and it has been for the past several decades. The CIA reports that 83% of the total population in 2022 lives in an urban area, and this amount is expected to grow close to 1% each year, as they estimate for 2020 to 2025. On the other hand, 746 counties in the US, or 24% of the US total, are non-metropolitan areas that are seeing depopulation. Depopulation, according to this, means that they reached peak population by 1950, and they lost at least 25% of that peak population by 2010. Urbanization entails city development as opposed to rural. It entails horizontal and vertical development, so structures next to structures next to structures, and structures that are tall rather than long. It entails elaborate road and freeway systems, and there's also sort of, depending on policymakers and those that are in charge of this deciding power, can choose their desired proportions of building to green spaces. It also entails deforestation / destruction of native plants. And I choose that term over deforestation because, for example, here in Phoenix, where I am, we don't exactly have a forest in the native land, but rather the native plants. So urbanization entails like digging up the area for waterways, gasways, and electricity. And then pavement all comes with urbanization. And now let's get into the heat island effect. Urbanization and industrialization have devastating effects on climate change in the long run, but the one I will focus on is urban heat islands. The definition, according to the EPA, is that structures such as buildings, roads, and other infrastructure absorb and re-emit the sun's heat more than the natural landscapes such as forests and water bodies. Urban areas where these structures are highly concentrated and greenery is limited become islands of higher temperatures relative to outlying areas. These pockets of heat are referred to as heat islands. This effect is not exclusive to summertime urban areas or large cities, but we see the effects more dramatically when it is in a large urban area. The causes, as mentioned, urbanization involves rapid development of a built environment, which includes everything from roads to houses to skyscrapers to sidewalks to parks and everything in between and beyond. With this comes an issue of excessive amounts of dark surface areas where there was once natural land. If you don't know already, rooftops and roads are infamous for being so dark that they absorb tremendous amounts of heat. Dark surfaces will absorb heat rather than reflect it, which is especially problematic as we continue to build and develop horizontally. Plus, as we minimize the number of trees to make way for a built environment, we are eliminating shade that would otherwise keep surfaces from absorbing so much heat. So these surfaces are absorbing a lot of excess heat that itself is known as surface heat island, because the surfaces become unnaturally warm to the touch. This is especially a problem during the day. And the EPA notes that on a warm day with a temperature of 91 degrees Fahrenheit, conventional roofing materials may reach as high as 60 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than air temperatures. The even bigger concern is that of atmospheric heat islands. This is an issue especially in the nighttime, when all the surfaces that trapped heat during the day start to slowly release the heat into the nighttime. This is the biggest contributor to the urban heat island effect. Characteristics that exacerbate the heat island effect. So minimize natural land, high heat absorbency of building materials, as well as size and density of buildings, because they can easily obstruct wind flow. We have anthropogenic heat sources such as cars, HVAC systems, manufacturing facilities, etc. Also weather conditions, because cloudy days block the sunlight and windy days circulate the air so that there is a cooling effect. And of course, a sunny day with no wind will make conditions much warmer. Geography and landscape also play a role, because the position and quantity of the surrounding mountains make a difference, because there is then an increase or decrease airflow and directionality of that air. A city such as here in Phoenix that is encompassed by mountains will trap more heat, with the mountains acting like a container that hold the heat inside, sorry. And now, though I could give you a plethora of environmental impacts, I will be focusing on those specific to humans and human health. So urban heat islands will result in our cities being warmer than they would naturally be, which we can tell by comparing the urban and rural temperatures of an area. And what does this mean for our health? Well, heat islands have been shown, for example, here in Phoenix, to create nighttime urban temperatures that are 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than in adjacent rural areas at the same time. Similar effects are seen in the daytime as well. This is very alarming, considering the excessive heat seen in the day becoming even more pronounced. And then on top of that, there being minimal cooling down in the nighttime. The most obvious direct threat to health from this is heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Prolonged exposure to heat will overheat the body and can lead to dizziness, confusion, disorientation, headache, vomiting, increased heart rate, seizure, permanent disability, and death, all according to the CDC. There's also rhabdomyolysis, which the CDC describes as rapid breakdown, rupture, and death of the muscle. Muscle tissue death releases electrolytes and large proteins into the bloodstream that can cause irregular heart rhythms, seizures, and damage the kidneys. Furthermore, there is heat syncope, which means fainting, heat cramps, heat rashes, and I will note as well that overall cardiovascular illnesses are adversely affected by heat. There's also increasing evidence suggesting that abnormally hot temperatures are detrimental to mental health. One study found that higher temperatures increase emergency department visits for mental illnesses, suicides, and self-reported days of poor mental health. They concluded that a large contributing factor is that the heat results in restless nights and sleep disruption, which over time becomes unfavorable for mental health. Also, all of these health impacts that I have mentioned and will mention can be highly stressful and anxiety-inducing to experience, which will further worsen mental health. Additionally, warmer climates are perfect for disease-carrying insects like mosquitoes, which are known to carry diseases such as Zika virus. So we may see increased cases of those kinds of diseases, especially considering that heat islands will cause more water to evaporate, often creating a more humid environment for them to breathe in. Another possibility related to the intensified evaporation is increased intensity and frequency of storms, which we know is detrimental to health. Storms can be physically dangerous through strong winds and floods, and they can also threaten our food and water supplies and our access to shelter and electricity. If you are in a prolonged, intense storm and you're sent to a storm shelter, there is the possibility of contagious illness outbreaks in those populated spaces. Intense heat also exacerbates greenhouse gases because tropospheric ozone and ground level ozone is formed from a combination of hydrocarbons, nitrous oxides, and heat. This will create an endless positive feedback loop of heat, creating ozone and ozone trapping heat. So it's an ongoing cycle that never ends. And on top of that, ozone and all of the greenhouse gases are a threat to air quality. Sensitive groups such as children, the elderly, and those with asthma or COPD will especially be affected through poor air quality, and direct inhalation of greenhouse gases and particulate matter is a threat to everyone. Similarly, intense heat and droughts can promote wildfires, which is another threat to respiratory and cardiovascular health due to smoke inhalation. Wildfires are also a physical threat, of course. So that was a lot of information, and I hope you listeners are reasonably concerned. So do not start screaming and flipping tables, freaking out, because there are solutions. The first solution is to plant more trees and vegetation / to minimize destruction of trees and vegetation. Trees can shade surface areas, and all plants transpire, so they sort of sweat and that water evaporates, creating a cooling effect. Also, vegetation and trees are less absorbent of heat than concrete or building materials. Doing this also has incredible positive impacts outside of heat islands. So I encourage it in general for things like minimized erosion and overall beautification. Who doesn't love greenery anyway? Increasingly popular is the idea of a green roof. A rooftop garden or a rooftop vegetation will reflect more light than a dark roof, and it will have the cooling effects, as I mentioned just now, not only for the nearby air, but for the building in which it occupies. Another alternative is just a lighter color or more reflective roof. If you have control over the color of your roof, of course, consider a color and a material that will not absorb so much warmth. Similar is pavimentation, so lighter pavements can act the same way. Consider how your driveway and your yard are pavimented if you have control of that. You can urge your politicians to consider keeping as much natural environment as possible as they continue to expand. Urbanization, urban expansion is inevitable and ubiquitous at this point, but the way that we do it makes all the difference. We can push them to create policies mandating all new developments to have light colored rooftops, for example, or that every X amount of miles there is some green space, those kinds of things. And that will make all the difference because it doesn't take a lot of new development to create a heat island effect. This can be done through strong community partnerships so that our voices are heard and our ideas are plentiful. We can create community resources like certified cool zones where there is always medics on standby for someone who is overheating, and plenty of water bottles and solar protective gear, that kind of thing. We can also support organizations that already exist that are fighting to stop climate change. Ultimately, heat islands are a big part of climate change, just as much as we picture carbon emissions to be. In this fight, we are protecting ourselves, at-risk populations, and future generations from all of the mentioned negative health impacts. So thank you for listening.